He's a 10.
I choose this family.
Hi guys, welcome to episode 6 of 911 Lone Star Roundup. I'm one of your hosts, Katie, and with me are my lovely friends and co-hosts, EJ.
Hey everyone.
Grace.
Hey.
And Shaz couldn't be with us today, but we miss her, of course, and yeah.
Miss you, Shaz.
Yeah.
I don't really know what else to say. Today we will talk about episodes 6 and 7 of Lone Star titled Friends Like These and Bum Steer. And just to recap, I guess, we won't be recapping these episodes or reviewing them. We'll just be talking about what stood out to us and stuff, and I guess we can just get right to it. So actually, episode 6 was the one that was written by John Owen, aka Rob's son. So that's a fun little fact about this episode. And the first thing that happened was the car accident where the car was under like a big truck and stuff, which is
semi-truck.
Super insane.
Yeah. I mean, technically, if you think about it, it makes sense.
Right, yeah.
But it's like, because I have seen that in other shows before, like that kind of thing. But it's always a thing like, one, how did you live? Two, well, sometimes they don't live. And just like a wow moment.
I'm reminded of, when I saw that, I'm kind of reminded of Fast and the Furious. The very first movie, there's that scene where the 3 black Hondas are zipping underneath the semi-truck to kind of confuse the driver because they're so low to the ground. So I was like, I thought about that briefly, but then yeah, like it makes sense. I mean, the driver had to slam on his brakes real quick, and you know he didn't know, and it's such a big rig. I have a friend who's a truck driver, or used to be, and he's like, yeah, he said you just kind of have to really be on your mirrors, but right on your bumper, you're not going to see the truck or see the car. So that was definitely a crazy scene.
Yeah. And so it was funny because the women actually knew each other, but they didn't realize until the one asked for like a charger or something. She was just like, oh, hey, that's so weird in a way. It was like kind of awkward, but not like kind of.
That beginning part before the crash actually happened, like that was so awkward. I had so much secondhand embarrassment.
Yes.
On that, like, I don't know what to do with myself. I'm not good with secondhand embarrassment.
I'm not either.
So, like, I like skipping through stuff like that. 'Cause I'm like, no.
Yeah, I just sit, like, if I was watching with somebody, like, the scene we were talking about in episode 5, the beginning scene, I was watching that with somebody, I probably would have just been like, okay, no, I can't be watching this. But, like, because I'm by myself, like, I'm like, okay, this is fine, but I'm just cringing the whole time.
Yeah. I'm actually the opposite. If I was watching it with somebody, especially if it's someone who hadn't seen it before, like, I'd keep it on. But myself, I just skip through.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a crazy scene just because, like, the one woman, like, she was pinned in there to the point where they couldn't get her out because she was, like, unstable. So they had to do, like, they needed to give her blood, but they had to do it person to person. The one woman was, like, O negative, so she's a universal donor, so they did person to person, which is super risky and stuff, which we kind of, or EJ and I mostly took note on this, that it was like similar to a night shift scene, 2 of them, where they did person. One was like in the middle of nowhere, and like they basically, whose blood was wetter determined who was going to like give the person blood.
Yeah.
And then
it was crazy.
Yeah, and then there was one where a tree trunk was like stuck in this dude, so like they had to take it out, and then like this one guy, he like literally, well, no, I'm thinking of something different, but I don't know where I'm going with this, but basically they take his own blood, and they put it in a bag, basically, and then they put it back in him, so like recycling his blood. It's insane.
It was crazy. Yeah, that one was in the pilot episode.
Right.
TC had come, and he saw some paramedics were trying to help this guy, and this like big chunk of a tree branch had like impaled him, and he was bleeding. I think his spleen had been ruptured, so he was bleeding, and they used just an IV bag to fill it with blood. Of his blood, and then they just put it back into him. And then the other one was, I think TC and Jordan were off somewhere, and they had to like do a person-to-person blood transfer, and it was like, and those are not safe. Like that's not something like is ever done. It's very 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 rare, and I think honestly about the only time they would do it is in like a combat situation where like that's why a lot of you see military people will usually have their blood type on their uniform.
On the dog tags?
Dog tags and on their uniform. My friends have some that have their, it's actually a patch on their shoulder.
You know, that's probably best, like, if the dog tags get lost. It's a little harder to, like, you lose the part of the uniform.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, and then, it makes it easy for, like, a combat medic to come in and say, hey, this is, this person's an O negative, they're a universal donor, so let's do it. And but it's very rare because it's very unsanitary and stuff. But, yeah, I thought it was cool that they did that just for, like, the suspense of just figuring it out. Because, we'd seen, like, the girls had a connection, like, they had been friends in high school, and then they kind of lost touch. And I think we can all relate to, like, losing touch with friends that we had in school and reconnecting and then bringing up old emotions and stuff, and then they're kind of trying to like connect again, but then there's this awkward stuff going on. Side note, I guess when they took the back window off of the car, Ronan was joking that him and Jules were like joking around in the trunk of the car.
Yeah.
And there's like, I guess, pictures of them with their feet sticking out.
I want those photos.
Yeah. No, I think they were filming, and it was before, that was like the last scene they filmed before they started winter break last year. And so they were still rolling, but they were like kicking their feet because they had so much energy.
I thought that was a funny little thing shared by Ronan, I believe.
Yep.
Carlos was on that call too, wasn't
he? Yeah, he was. And I really liked that view of him because we haven't really seen him necessarily be like, he was talking to the one woman that was like not really injured, and he was like, ma'am, calm down, tell me what happened. And I was just like, we haven't really seen like that part on a call. I feel like he's been at the scene of some of the incidents, but not really, like, we didn't see that extent of what like a police officer would do in that situation.
Right.
I mean, I think the most we've seen was back in episode 2 where he was talking to the coworker of the woman who jumped during the Mad Hatter scene.
Right.
Because like he was being like nice there, but he was being like, was she on any substances, anything like that?
Yeah.
I think that's the most we've seen other than the scene of Carlos just interacting with the civilians.
Yeah, it was definitely like a different vibe for me than that one.
Yeah.
That one was very like high intensity, I think is a good way to explain it. Where like a lot of people were going down, it wasn't just her. Where this one, it was kind of like, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know.
It's pretty typical fire call that, police have to be involved in because it's an accident. But we've seen the like very, he said, suspenseful scenes.
It's interesting, actually. The other day I saw a map of the distribution of the O blood type. And when I saw it, I originally thought of this scene, actually, because type O's can deliver blood to anybody. Is it O's or O negatives? I'm trying to remember.
O neg.
Well,
actually, I think it's O family.
Yeah, because they just have it, and that's great. And you know what? If they're going to like need that kind of blood transfer, it's better off doing it here because we're like the second highest percentage of population with the blood type O distribution.
Yeah, O is a universal donor, which is cool because then they can give blood to anybody.
Yeah,
because there's those rare blood types where sometimes you can't find a match. I know when my mom was going through chemo treatment, because her blood counts always would go down so much, they had to always give her blood transfusion. So I learned a lot about blood and the transfusion process.
Yeah.
Then another big thing that happened this episode, well, this will be probably the first like big storyline for the episode. Mateo's studying for his test, and it's fun. This part's kind of sad but kind of funny. I'm like, oh, poor Mateo. He's like, I can't study home because my roommates are playing beer pong all night. And then he's like, it's the last time before I wash out. And I'm like, oh poor Mateo.
Also, I love Marjan in that scene. Just like, okay, what'd I do? When she gets called in by Owen.
Yeah.
I'm like, relatable.
Yeah.
But I actually kind of find it cute that like how much she was determined to help him out and everything.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's later in the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll definitely get there more. So yeah.
I think that was a tough one, because at first she's like, well, then you better be studying, and then the guys are coming down and they're talking about Judd's talking about poker, and he's trying to invite the whole like everybody to come over, and then Marjan's like, don't invite Mateo because he's got to study.
Yeah.
So we kind of learn the next part of the episode, which is that Judd has a poker game every once in a while with some local firefighters, and a spot opened up, and he's trying to get one of the crew to join him.
Yeah. Well, even before that, I just love everyone's responses.
Oh yeah.
Oh my
Like,
gosh, yeah.
TK's like, I know a rope of dope when I see one.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And Paul's like, cards bore me.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like, I can figure everybody's cards out by their reaction.
He'll do the thing.
And,
Yeah.
and Marjan's like, gambling is really not my jam. And I was like, I kind of see that.
Yeah. I cannot picture her doing that at all.
No.
And then Owen
Oh yeah.
over here.
He's like, I'll play.
and it's like, maybe
And
not.
Judd's like, and TK's like, I thought it was a friendly game,
Yeah.
Judd.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like, well, it is, but okay, let's do it. Oh, and that's when he uses it's just a bunch of Texas roughnecks.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And cut to Owen at the game.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Do you have any seaweed or kale chips? Sorry, Cat.
Sorry, Cap. Rabbit food won't go over with the sponge.
I mean, same. I wouldn't eat either of those personally.
Yeah, I mean, I like kale chips and I've had seaweed before, but like it's not exactly like game night snack material.
No.
It's not.
Like, no.
Yeah, definitely not.
And I think it's fun that this is a quirky side of Owen that we just get to see more of.
Yeah.
Because we already know, like, he has that kind of quirk, but like this, it's like, okay, we're seeing it.
Yeah. Grace is all worried for Owen, and like
Yeah.
we're kind of like, okay, where's this going? And like basically, like Grace has to force out of Judd to tell Owen about Billy, who apparently hates Owen, and Owen's like, I don't even know a Billy Tyson.
Right.
He's like, well, I'll hate the idea of you.
Yeah. But before all that happened, when Grace first came into the scene, did you see the look on Judd's face when she walked out? He was like, and that's when she's like, easy cowboy, because she could tell what he was thinking.
Yeah.
I was like, that's totally like, women need a guy that looks at them like Judd looks at his wife. Love it.
Oh yeah, like they're adorable.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I love how we see like more of them in like we got more of them in the 4 and 5 episodes as well.
Yeah.
But like we see more of their relationship with how everything goes down with Billy and then having to talk about it. I'm like, I like seeing this little like this other view.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I love like when like Grace is trying to talk Judd into telling him. Judd's explains it, and then Owen's like, or no, Judd didn't explain it. Owen's like, now's a good time. How about now? Now he's just like in that panic of like, oh my god, like you got to tell me what's going on here. And then he learns about like Billy and that whole thing we just talked about. Yeah, it was. I don't know. When we meet Billy, like the first time I saw it, I didn't realize Billy Burke was going to be there, and I'm like, Billy Burke will always be Charlie Swan to me. So it's like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it
definitely.
was cool to see him on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I only saw one of the Twilight movies, and that was like a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But I did see him, and I was like, he looks so familiar. I just can't think of when. I actually didn't realize who he was. Actually, I think until like we started talking about it at some point in time, because I was like, oh wait, he is Charlie Swan.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense.
Oh yeah.
Literally me.
Yeah, and like so that poker nights, Judd, I don't know, like the facial expression Judd had at kind of the end of the night, like made me think that he thought it went well. But then like the next day, I'm like, I don't know, I got this vibe. I'm like, I don't know if I should trust this Billy character.
I didn't trust him, but I also had no idea of what to think
Right.
of him. And so it was just, I was like, okay, it went too well for a storyline that they're putting in here.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, there's gotta be some other, like, there's gotta be something else coming.
Yeah, so next we've got like, I don't know, like the next day or the next shift. So like a day or two later.
It was like the next morning, I assumed, because Owen calls Marjan in early, and she's like, "Am I in trouble?" And Owen's like,
principal's office.
Yeah, Owen's like, "What makes you think that?" She's like, "I've been reprimanded enough times to know that." And I'm like, "Oh my god!" But basically, Owen basically tells Marjan that she needs to help Mateo study for his test, and because she was the one that got the highest grade in the house, and
That doesn't surprise me, honestly.
no, it doesn't. And Marjan's like, she's like, why? And Owen tells her that Mateo's dyslexic, and she's like, oh, okay. And I love that I first love that he's dyslexic because when I was growing up, I had a learning disability. So for me, that's like very relatable and stuff, especially in episode 1 when he was like, oh, I've always been told that I was a little slow. Because it's definitely like something I connect with and stuff. So it's just meaningful, I guess.
I love how Owen had taken the time to put that together.
Right.
And just be like, okay, there's something else going on here. Like, he's not stupid. He's just having trouble. This is why. I think it's really important because people are so fast to label somebody. And obviously, this is what has happened with Mateo before.
Yes.
Well, and
So,
well, and he's
him finally having somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he'd taken the test like multiple times and failed it because it's a written test.
Yeah, like he'd done perfectly in the field work, but the paperwork was the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you're dyslexic and numbers, you get numbers switched around, and so like I'm glad that I think Owen went to bat for him to get a phrase accommodation.
Yeah.
To take it a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool. But I love it. Like I love how like Marjan's like she kind of like quickly agrees, and she's like, but I'm gonna need like a major credit card, and I'm gonna have to make a lot of copies.
Love that.
But I love how like then all of a sudden she comes in and she's trying to get the crew to like she's like, okay, you guys are gonna read all these, and I need these. She gives out the like manuals, and they're all like, well, I don't want to do this. What do we need to do this for? And then she explains, and then or no, she doesn't. TK says it.
Yeah.
He says, oh, he's dyslexic, and then everybody like jumps to like, okay, we're gonna help him through this, and they're like all gonna like read part of the manuals that he needs to study and like record them so Mateo can listen to him. And I thought that was really cool to see like how all of a sudden like as soon as they figured out what the situation was, they jumped to want to be helping him.
Yeah. I'm sure, like I imagine even if he hadn't been dyslexic, like if he needed help, they probably would have given in and like helped him anyway. But I doubt it would have been quite the same way.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have been the same quality of help that obviously he needed. Also, I love how Judd was assigned fire science or something like that just because he has the Texas drawl.
Yeah. She's like, because you talk the slowest. And then seeing like TK sits down at one of the tables and he just kind of looks like, okay, I'm doing this. It was just, I don't know, that look that Ronan had was just like classic for him.
Didn't he, let's see, was he the one that had the situation like thing? Well, to me, that sounds like the most fun out of any of them.
Yeah.
Really?
On the job scenarios.
Yeah, like I love scenarios. Give me them, I'll do them. The rest of it is like, okay. Maybe
I
not.
personally probably would have gone for fire science. I think I would have really enjoyed that.
I don't know,
Yeah.
I kind of like situations. I don't know why.
What was Paul assigned? Like, what were the other ones?
I don't remember.
I don't know.
I didn't write down Paul's.
Doesn't Billy show up the same shift? Is that...
Yeah,
Yeah.
he shows up and Owen invited him and Judd's like, oh, aren't you two some couple of fast friends? And I was like, yeah, we'll see about that.
He was like, I don't trust this. And let's be honest, Owen was having a lot of fun bragging.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
well, it was
Which, like, he had something to be proud of.
Yeah.
But, like,
his first time
rubbing it
showing
in a
off,
little
yeah.
bit. Yeah.
showing him the station and new things he did.
Yeah. And I think at that point, I was like, I think half of me was eased into the friendship. Like, I'm like, okay, they're getting along. But then the rest of me was like, oh, there's something not quite right here. Like,
Yeah. There was just a little bit of, like, tension already there. I could tell that, like, Billy wasn't necessarily pleased by Owen. Because, like,
yeah.
even when they were playing poker, like, Billy, I assume, never lost. And he didn't like losing. And it was, it was already a competition for both of them. And they both want to win or whatever.
And so the next one is the dog scene.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah.
I had so many thoughts when that happened. Because, like, we get the call of the dog, seeing the kids.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there and I was like, I didn't know what was happening with the kids.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, please don't let the dog be hurt or anything. Because I'm such a softie for animals.
Yeah.
Me too.
Like,
yeah.
and, like, obviously there was bloodstains on the neck, and I'm like, oh man, what's going on here?
Right.
I did not expect what came next.
Yeah.
No, I didn't either. But
Like the tractor.
Yeah.
just that whole like scene, like they're called to like what they think is like just a dog, crazy dog, and they're like, oh, let's call animal control, and these little girls are up on top of this car, and this dog's just barking and going crazy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then Owen's like, no, just wait a second. He's like, like going through all the specifics of like the dog and how it's reacting and stuff. And he's like, that's not a dog. That's what is it? That's not a scary dog. That's a dog that's scared.
Yeah. And you can tell like by the dog's stance or like how their tail is if it's scared or if it's actually like vicious and it's gonna attack.
Yeah, and I love like I think it was Mateo asked, he's like, how's your dad know so much about dogs? He asked TK, and TK's like, oh, dad loves dogs and Caesar Milan, which is the dog whisperer. And I love how like Owen's like calming the dog down and then like tells Marjan and TK to go get the girls, and then like the little girl was like, when TK gets her off the car, she's like, do you know you have really big muscles? And Marjan just kind of laughs and she goes, trust me, he knows.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that part. I love that message, because most of the time, like, we don't think of TK as being, I don't know, like, self-absorbed, but, like, he's confident with himself. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that's the first time, like, we get a little bit of ribbing and, like, okay, maybe he's a little more self-confident than we realized.
Yeah.
yeah. So then after they get the girls, then the dog kind of like looks at them and then takes off kind of across the field. And so I think it's Paul that says, I guess we're doing that Lassie thing, which is another great line in that scene. Like, they're like, okay, let's follow the dog. And then they come across this big tractor this guy is pinned under, and he'd been by himself doing some work, and the dog was kind of alerting at somebody to what was going on.
Yeah. And when the tractor came in, like, I was raised on a farm. So, like, seeing the equipment and everything, I went, oh my gosh, like, that guy was super lucky to have been alive at all. And that stuff, like, you think it's dangerous, but it's far more dangerous than you realize. That's why there are, like, so many rules for handling it. And you don't ever want to just wing it. Like, no.
Yeah, but I'm glad the guy was alive and they were able to get him out. But yeah, that was definitely, I did not expect that. I had a feeling that it would be like I could tell there was blood on the dog, so I could tell, and it didn't look like the dog was hurt. I felt like there would be a human involved.
Yeah.
I didn't quite expect that.
Yeah.
So then after that,
yeah, I knew there'd be an injury and stuff, but that was definitely different.
Yeah.
Good different.
Yeah. And like,
So
and then like, before even like when he was waiting to like get an ambulance, like he was laying there and the dog realized he was okay and started licking him. And
Tim was like, is that hygienic?
And Tim, Tim was like, I don't know.
That's so not sanitary.
Yes,
or something.
that's what it was.
And so I think someone nudged him, like, shut up.
Yeah. He has the best, like, one-liners.
Yeah.
He really does, yeah. And that's probably my favorite of all of them. Like, oh, that's so fun. Because, like, you're watching it, and you're thinking it, but also you're enjoying it.
Yes.
So he's saying what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Like,
I was
okay.
like, I think the first time I saw that, I was like, nobody cares about that. Like, I let my dog lick my face all the time. I don't care.
Yeah.
As long as my dog doesn't get any of my, like, features, like my lips, my eyes, or anything like that, because I don't like them being touched, she's fine licking my jaw, my cheek. Like, I don't care being licked on the face.
Yeah.
So then after this scene, they get back to the station, and there's Owen is putting in his office. He's got golf clubs. And when Billy had visited, he'd noticed the golf putters, and like they started talking golf, and Billy invited him golfing, so he's practicing because it's been a while. And Michelle comes in and kind of warns him about Billy. Apparently, there was a little statement that Michelle and Billy had a thing at some point, so I thought that was a little thrown in there. That was kind of interesting. I didn't remember catching that the first time. I missed that. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that's like I think Owen and Michelle would make a terrible couple, but I also think that Billy and Michelle would also make equal.
They would make an even worse couple.
Like they both have very big egos, and they just, I don't know how to like really get real into it, but it's just like, oh, that's like a little too much.
Yeah, definitely. Which I guess that's why it was in the past tense.
Yeah.
Not like a present.
That's why it did not work out.
Yeah, so then we get kind of almost kind of like a montage of the team testing Mateo.
Yes.
The recordings, I liked listening to those, but then they're waking him up like in the middle of the night and just drilling him.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's the kind of team that you want, like, behind
Yeah.
you. You may think it's annoying at the time, but it pays off.
Yes. Yeah, I love that whole moment.
And you can see Mateo's confidence starting to grow because like he's getting the help he needs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So then we see Billy and Owen out on the golf course, and I thought I didn't catch it the first time, but Billy called Owen Tiger, which I believe is a reference to Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was like in the same series we've got now son and dad called Tiger.
I was just thinking that because, okay, let's be honest, I skipped through like all the golf scenes because, for one thing, I don't like golf. For another thing, their interactions made me cringe. So, like, seeing like, he mentioned that, it's like, oh, that, you know what, I'm just going to think of Tiger as being TK's name.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Oh, yeah, definitely. And then on the, like, kind of the same, so while they're walking to, like, their next hole, Owen mentions, he's like, so Judd mentioned that you took some time off. And so the backstory that we got with Billy was that he actually was a member of the 126. And when
He had been the captain, right?
I believe so. And when he had taken the time off is when the accident happened that killed the original 126 except Judd. So when he came back to work, he got stationed at the 121, which is another station and probably the best one in the county. But he'd always wanted to come back to the 126. So I think that was kind of where we kind of figure it out. But then Owen had been told, oh yeah, he'd been off. So he asked him why. So Billy explains, oh yeah, I had thyroid cancer and I took a year off to get treatment and now I'm good and going on. And then through like the conversations they'd had over the next some time, and then at lunch, kind of Owen finally shares that, you know, he's got lung cancer and is doing treatment while on the job. And I think he opens his mouth a little bit too much because he got too comfortable with Billy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that whole scenario, I had to be like, okay, I'm sure that like Billy's cancer was true, but I felt like he was fishing. I seriously felt like he was fishing, and like obviously there's no way he could have known like Owen had cancer, but because nobody except Judd and TK knew at that point, and Judd wouldn't have told, and TK definitely wouldn't have told.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's the point where I really started to be like, okay, something is seriously wrong here. Like the moment that whole exchange went down, Owen like told about his cancer. I'm like, so this is not going to turn out well.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's when my actual full-on distrust of Billy started.
And then we get a Mateo and Marjan scene, which I really liked this scene. It was basically when Mateo's like still kind of freaking out about his test. I think she was quizzing him at this point, and then he kept like changing his answer and being like, no, it's this. And she's like, you know, chill out, like just say the first thing you think of. And then she was kind of like, well, why are you freaking out? And Mateo reveals that he's a dreamer, so he migrated from somewhere. We don't really know specifically yet and everything, but he didn't even know he had an American birth certificate until he was 17.
Oh, like he didn't have one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a bummer. Like that would be a shock to be like, oh yeah, by the way, you're 17. You're 17. You're getting ready to start your life and you know, figuring out what you want to do, and then you find out that you don't even have an American birth certificate.
Yeah.
Gosh, I can't imagine that. And I loved in that scene, like Marjan says, oh, and you'll be like a Jedi. And then Mateo's like, I can't remember exactly the names he used, but I can't remember if it was Obi. I know he said Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn, and Marjan's like, I don't know who any of those are.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you didn't know that?
Even I know those. I mean, I've seen some of the movies, but not like all of them.
I only saw 7 of them, and it definitely wasn't my favorite franchise. Yeah. And let's be honest, the only one I know off the top of my head is like Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, like those kinds. But I'm still like, okay. I mean, it's fairly popular, so even if you don't know the movies themselves, you're likely to have heard the names.
It's more like the names are pretty iconic. And in that moment, Marjan like gives us a little bit of her wisdom, which I love. And
me too.
She says memento mori, which I know exactly what that was way before the show because I studied that in school in British literature and stuff. And I was like, I know exactly what that is, which is interesting because a lot of times shows will kind of mess up the true meaning, which she got it pretty much right, but I was like, no, that's not exactly what that means.
So I don't remember that. What is
It's
memento
basically
mori?
like the way I've always learned it, which I view to be the correct way, was knowing that you're gonna die someday. And
Yeah.
stuff, so basically you just have to deal with that. And like I forget what actually I read that like was the symbol for that, because I read it a couple times, but I read it a long time ago, so I can't remember. But I was like, okay, not exactly right. And it's actually funny because my brother has that tattooed on his arm, just Memento Mori in font, and I'm like, you do know what that means? And he's like, yeah, some singer had it. It was their motto.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he has some interesting tattoos, but that's like that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's just one of those where like all of the stuff that we're doing now is meaningless because we're gonna eventually die one day.
Yeah.
So everything we do, we want to do our best, but eventually it's gonna mean nothing. I think it's kind of the way
That's a
she
rather
explained
depressing
it.
thought.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
I mean,
But she was trying to get him to just think, hey, don't stress out like on every single word. Just use what comes from your gut because you know this stuff.
Yeah.
And what happens happens.
Yes.
Right. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
and like that's important to realize. What happens happens.
I mean, in life purposes, that's like a good way of looking at it. But like in my learning purposes, my teacher would be like, "No, that is not it."
Right.
So I guess the next is the test time. The proctor was, oh my gosh,
his old captain,
which I think made it worse because I forget whether or not it was confirmed, but I'm pretty sure like he was the one that made Mateo feel so stupid.
Oh yeah, I think he said that.
And
I
I'm
could
just
tell
like
the way he acted.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he was like, oh, you're going to fail. That was basically his attitude, and I was like, oh, that's not okay.
Well, yeah, and they knew going into it that he was going to do an audio test, like they were going to give it to him verbally, but then they thought Marjan was going to be the one reading the questions to him, but
which would have been better for Mateo,
right? Because he'd studied with her and practiced. But I can kind of understand why they didn't allow that, just because like they said no, the people from the same house can't be in there because they could have just cheat. I don't think they would cheat on a test like this, but they just wanted to make
certainly
sure
a possibility
it was,
of happy.
Yeah,
I mean, they could have let her read the questions, and they could have observed it. Like
that's true. Yeah, they could have done that,
but I think they just want to make it more difficult, and of course, for drama purposes, like they did that.
Yeah, of course. And maybe it also depended on like the tester. Like maybe a different one would have been maybe a little bit more lenient.
Right.
But that guy wasn't being lenient.
No. And then after he takes his test, the whole team showed up for him, and he was like, "You guys showed off on your day off." And Owen's like, "We may not be on a shift, but we never stop being the 126." And I was like, "Oh,
I love that.
That's so sweet."
Love that.
And I love what Judd says too. He's like, "Well, they're all trying to find out what happened," and he said, "Well, if it's good news, we'll drink whiskey." And TK, I love how TK's like, "No, I'll be drinking mineral water, or some of us will be drinking mineral water. Either way."
I was like, "Yeah, good boy, TK." Oh.
And then, right in that moment, Owen gets a call from Deputy Chief Redford, and TK is like, "What was that about?" And he's like, "I don't know, like, Deputy Chief wants to talk to me." And we basically immediately find out that Billy told him about his cancer. He's like, "Oh, I didn't know that you didn't tell him." It's like, yeah, okay. Bull crap, you didn't know. Of course you knew he didn't know.
And that... To be honest, I knew the episode was wrapping up, and I didn't know there'd be like a continuation. So I'm like, what are they going to do with Billy? Like, is he staying? Because I don't like him that much. I don't want him to stay. Yeah. Like, what are they doing? There hasn't been like a climax to this. And so when that scene came around, I went, oh, that's the climax.
Yeah. Like, as a fan, I hate that storyline, but as like somebody looking at it in a story, I like the drama because it makes it interesting.
From a storyline point of view, like, I think it was necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there were other ways they could have, like, had the team find out, had the department find out. Like, there were so many other ways that could have happened. But I just think that was a interesting way of doing it.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like that was what Billy wanted. He was playing a game the whole time. Like, he wasn't really becoming friends with Owen. He was just doing anything he can to get anything out of him. And
Right.
I don't think he expected him to get, oh, I have cancer out of him. But
Yeah.
Owen got comfortable with him, and I think he was hoping to have something slip. And
Yeah, he wanted any dirt he could use against, like, the perfect captain from New York.
Right.
Because he wanted the 126.
Yep. And you know, so, and I feel like, because Deputy Chief Radford, well, he was definitely in a tough spot, because now he finds out that this guy that, you know, they, you know, brought there to help do the 126, and he completely says, you know, you did what you did with the 126 was amazing. And he's like, but if, you know, he's like, I'm kind of in a tough spot. And Owen's like, well, I'm completely able to do it, because Billy was trying to, like, over exaggerate some things that Owen had said about, oh, I have to throw up once in a while from the chemo and blah, blah, blah. So it was just like.
And they're not going to listen to Owen saying about it, because they'd view it as him saving himself.
Right.
But unfortunately, that means that they're taking the overreaction and the exaggerations.
Yeah, so then they're, you know, and then Owen's like, well, I'm as fit as any other captain here. So he's like, I'll do the CPAT, which is the candidate physical ability test, in full PPE. So with the bunker gear on, the mask, the tank, just like 75 pounds worth of gear. And Owen says, I'll do it. Yeah. You name a time and place. I'm like, oh, so that's the climax. What's going to happen? But in a way, I'm kind of glad they did it that way, because Radford could have totally said, well, you're completely suspended until we resolve this, and not given him a chance, and then put Billy in there, which is kind of what I thought was going to happen. It's just what Billy wanted. But then somehow Owen would fight to get his job back or something. I don't know. Like, I had a couple of different theories as to what was going to happen. So I'm kind of pleasantly surprised they went a little differently than I expected.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't put much thought to it. Like, I didn't really think about it. I was like, it's gonna be fine.
Yeah. Well,
I knew they weren't going to get rid of him, and I think that was the comforting thing. Like, he's going to be fine, but how are they doing it?
Yeah. You know, and then, like, after the chief leaves, Billy's starting to leave, and Owen chases after him, and he's like, you know, you want the 126, and they start talking about it, and Billy's like telling him he's basically going to get rid of the entire crew. And he's like, I think Owen said something like, if you want my crew or my house, you got to come take it.
And, like, obviously cares about, like, the firehouse, he cares about the crew, but I think that also shows how much he cares about the people. Because, like, they all uprooted their lives. And obviously, I'm actually going to address that a little bit more when we talk about episode 7, because I know they also talked about it. But, like, he's like, I'm not going to let you displace me. I'm not going to let you hurt my crew. Like, I'm going to do everything I can to fight and stay here.
Well, and I just feel like, you know, Owen has put his time into this place. He does, like, and things are going well for him and his son. And I think he just wants to, he's going to fight, obviously. And, so we'll talk about it more about that next episode. But yeah, the only thing in this episode I would have liked better is if we would have had more of a team reaction. Because at this moment, the only people that know besides Billy, Deputy Chief Radford, is TK and Judd.
Yeah.
And I would have liked
Which at least TK knew by this point.
Right.
Like, if he hadn't, there would be so much.
Yeah.
Because, you know, so I would have liked to have even just like a Owen sharing it to the team, and maybe not their reactions, because we got that in the next episode. But
I would have liked to have seen it as he told it.
Yeah.
Instead of it coming out from maybe somebody else, because we don't know how they figured it out. Did they overhear? Did Owen just tell them on their next shift?
I mean, I imagine he told them, and I would have loved to have seen it either way. And I am disappointed that we didn't get it,
because I like the team bonding, and I think that would have been a good moment. But
yeah. So moving on to episode 7, the first scene that we got was the bull at, like, a auctioned used car lot. That's kind of the feeling I got of what it was.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It almost seemed like an event, because you had, like, the auctioneer, and then you had just, like, people looking at cars and stuff like that.
Oh,
I thought it was like the opening of the car lot or something.
Yeah, it was a car
and
lot.
I was like,
and the guy was,
why is there a rodeo bull here?
They needed a main attraction.
Oh man, they got
like,
one.
Oh, they
Yeah.
did. More than anyone bargained
Yeah,
for.
it was like a kid that basically just got his license. He backs into another car, and then the bull just goes off. And I'm like, oh, poor bull.
Mm-hmm. And the
Yeah.
bull scared him.
Yeah.
Like, at least they made it, like, completely realistic because, like, obviously this is a rodeo bull. He's trained. Or, not exactly trained, but, you know, he's feisty.
Yeah.
But, like, animals, especially, like, bulls, are easily startled.
Yeah.
And they don't know what a car is. To him, it was most likely the sound of a monster or something.
Yeah.
Like, they don't know.
Yeah.
And that entire scene, I was like, oh, please don't let somebody hurt the bull. Please let
Yeah.
the bull be okay. Like, I care more about the bull than I did about anybody else.
Yes.
Because I was like, when an animal attacks people, there's a good chance it's going to be put down.
Yeah.
And I was like, please don't let them hurt the bull.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, you know, because we see the kind of carnage, and then, like, the 126 pulls up, and they're, like, looking around, and they're like, was it TK that see? I don't see a bull. And then Judd, I think, says, that's not good. and Owen's like, get the axes. And I think Judd says something like, I don't think axes are going to do much for a 2,000-pound bull. And I'm like, I totally agree with that. It's not going to do much.
But seriously, like, even if you do manage to land a blow in, you're still going to likely be speared with one of the horns.
Yeah.
And
because that's a Texas Longhorn bull. I mean, it's got some big horns.
They live up to their names. Like,
yeah.
Longhorns.
You know, and so then so I think Michelle was there, and Owen's like, where's the bull? And she's like, follow the trail or something, and it's all the, like, broken pieces and the broken windows and all
and
that.
And the broken bodies and the, yeah.
Yeah, and so TK, when they finally find the bull, TK's like, yeah. So they have to call APD and let them know. And TK calls and says, like, APD, we have a bull in the car, in a car.
Yeah.
And I was like, I wonder if Carlos would have heard that, you know? Like, because we didn't see him on scene. So, like, was he not there? And so, like, would he have overheard that? Because, like, Fire's calling APD to, you know.
If he was near the radio, he would have heard it, most likely. So...
And you would have recognized TK's voice.
Yeah.
Well, we should hope so.
Yeah. And so the bull his horns have run into, like, this old station wagon. And
he's trapped.
I felt, he's stuck and he can't move. And I feel bad for the bull, you know.
Well, especially since, like, his neck was cut. Like, he was bleeding all over. And that is, especially with a panicking animal, they're lucky. Like, anybody's lucky the bull survived that. Which, with a 2,000-pound bull, I don't know how that would have gone over with, like, the car, but, it just never would have been a good situation.
And I love how Owen went all animal whisperer again, and, like, they opened up the back of the car, and he's, like, trying to talk to the bull calmly, and he tells him, I'd appreciate it if you didn't kill any of my team. And I swear the bull, like, grunts and says, like, okay, I know he didn't, but it just
like that kind of reluctant, like if you insist kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like, fine.
I don't feel like it anyway. It was kind of my impression.
And then while he's talking, while Owen's talking to the bull, he kind of mentions, he's like, how'd you get in this mess? Feels like things are out of control. He's like, and I'm like, yeah, he's definitely not just talking about the bull.
And Judd knows that too, because he's like, you know, like those memes and those gifs where, like, somebody slowly peeks around the corner or something. I kind of felt like that was Judd just going, nah, excuse me, what? What's happening?
Yeah, so that whole scene, and, you know, and I obviously, the bum steer is the name of the episode, so again, we're gonna get some references somehow into the episode.
Yeah, and it's Texas. They had to do a bull scene.
Yeah. They couldn't just do it with, like, the, well, you know, bull stuff factory, but...
Yeah.
Like, they had to bring the bulls.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They basically had to do, like, all the Texas stereotypes in season 1 just to be like, okay, we know these exist. We have to make fun of them a little bit.
Yeah.
And then we see Owen practice for his CPAT test. And,
oh, my God. I loved that TK was there helping him, though.
Yeah.
Aww.
Yeah, and I liked it because it was kind of like, the beginning of it was kind of like a montage. And I was like, okay, I can get behind this.
Yeah, and, you know, we see, like, Owen, I loved how they were using a cover of Eye of the Tiger.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that song. And so it fits so well.
Yeah, it did. And, Obviously there's, the recruits have to get the finish the test in 10 minutes and 20 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're timing Owen as he's doing this. And I think at one point when he passed out or finished it the first time was like 13 or 14 minutes.
And he was like, that's less than ideal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was funny.
I loved his reactions. Like, it's pretty chill.
And TK's trying to talk to his dad. Like, I can't believe you're doing this. This is crazy. And
TK knows he volunteered.
Yeah.
Which I was like, okay, that's interesting, because nobody else does at that point in time.
Yeah, and TK's like, you just had to play golf with him. He's like, well, you don't play with me. And TK's like, yeah, but I can learn.
I think that's
like,
funny.
oh.
I mean, it's kind of sad in a point, but I still think it's funny.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they did the reference with the golf because Rob definitely golfs.
Oh yeah.
And his sons, I think, out golf with him. So
yeah,
I think that was definitely a cool nod to him and his sons.
Yeah. And TK just being like, I would have learned if it just would have avoided all of this.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah, and then we get kind of the other team members talking about Owen's cancer, and it's, I don't know. It's kind of sad because, like, Mateo's like, I don't want Cap to die when they're, like, talking about it, and Marjan's like, Cap's not gonna die, Texas has the best cancer doctors.
I love how they all softened and were like, oh, okay, we gotta comfort baby, was kind of my thought.
Right, and I feel for Mateo in that moment because I'm like, if I was in Mateo's situation, I'd be watching like Marjan and Paul were basically talking to each other about like how they both uprooted their lives in their other places to come join us, join the team. And then, so I feel for Mateo as if I was in his position, I'd be sitting there and I'd be like watching like Marjan and Paul complaining about, not complaining, but they were definitely raising concerns about having uprooted their lives to come to Texas for Owen. And then they're finding out that basically if Billy does take over the 126, they're pretty much out of a job. And then they're referencing the fact that Judd is his people, Billy's people, being Texas was a 126 member before, so they and Judd's trying to kind of reassure him, that's not going to happen, and Judd's like, guys, we're still 126, and but then so then we have
Marjan says that Proby's just as Texas as you, but nobody will be mistaking you as brothers. And Judd is like, we are brothers because we are the same number on our badge.
I feel for Judd in this situation because it's like he's stuck between his old captain, his friend, and his new captain and his friend. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, this is a whole mess. And I kind of feel for everybody because, and I think something's overlooked in this. Like, people talk about how, it wouldn't go well for Paul and Marjan, or even necessarily Mateo. Obviously because skin color, not Texan, religion, gender, any of the above. And I'm like, I think people forget that TK would be even more impacted because A, he's gay. B, he's the other captain's son. Like, do you really think he'd be faring very well under Billy? Like, I doubt he'd stay there if his dad wasn't there anymore, but still, I think it gets overlooked. And, I think he'd get the worst of it, honestly.
Yeah, when it comes to Billy, definitely.
Yeah. Of all of it, I think I feel like if TK stuck around, Judd would do his best to protect him, but it would be hard because again, he would be in a
honestly,
tough spot.
I want a fan fiction from that. I'm going to have to write that fan fiction. Sorry, I'm thinking.
Here for it.
Oh my gosh, I have so
we will read it.
Anyway, go on.
After this, we get a scene where we kind of learn. So Michelle's works for this nonprofit, kind of helping out homeless people. And she goes to this homeless camp under an overpass. And while she's there helping some people out, where she finds out that this young girl and her dad are in this camp, and it sounds like he's a veteran struggling with PTSD from the war, and his little girl has diabetes, so she's needing insulin, and he'd been on some sounds like some antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication that he gave to somebody else that he called Sad Eyes in the purple tent. And I got a vibe of something at that moment, but I didn't really think much of it because then after that...
Same. I was like, okay, they're not going to leave that. They dropped that for a reason. So what's happening?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And they put it in there for a reason too.
Yeah.
And so, and then Michelle's like chases off that guy
Oh my
that's trying to
gosh.
break into the van she had. And then Carlos shows up. She's like, well, now you show up.
And he's just
Iconic.
like, oh, seriously? We have talked about this.
He's like, what are you doing? And he starts reprimanding her about coming down there by herself. But then he, mentions that they found something
Yeah.
for the search for her sister.
He had so much sass on his face, like his facial expressions in that moment.
Yeah, so then after that, with the sass that we get from Carlos, then they go to the station where the detective is that's involved in her sister's case, and Carlos and Michelle are sitting there waiting to be called by this detective, and promise me you'll be calm. Be
And
nice
like
to
Michelle
her.
basically promises no such thing.
And like they're like sitting there and she's like bouncing her foot or something, and he's like, can you stop doing the bouncing foot thing? It's making me
The way he says that,
tense."
it's like it's making
me
me tense. Like the very measured
same.
like,
voice.
It's making me tense. I'm holding myself together here.
And she's like, what do you mean? And he goes, that thing you
It's
do
like,
when
no,
you're
I don't.
nervous,"
It's
or
just
something
and he's
like
like,
that.
yes, you do, and it's making me tense. It's iconic, and I love the sass we see between them.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, and then we're sitting there, they're sitting there talking to the detective who's, kind of like glaring at Carlos, like, don't tell me you did investigation on my case
like,
without informing me. And he's like, well, we didn't want to do anything and give you anything until we had more information. So he's like trying to
She
cover
pretty much
his
lets
rear.
it go, which that's good.
But then as they're leaving again, she gets all sarcastic with the detective, and Carlos is just kind of glaring at her like, shut up.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's like, you promised.
After this is when we get Grace and Judd at home. They're getting ready for bed, and Judd's kind of talking to her about the situation with Billy and the team and how kind of everybody's struggling. And I love how Grace stood up for Paul and Marjan, because she's basically saying, she's like, they uprooted their lives, and any of the crew, she felt like Paul and Marjan have a legitimate reason to be concerned, and TK as well too, because none of them are from Texas. And she, then she goes on to start telling Judd that he needs to talk to Judd or talk to Owen and talk to Billy and kind of try and figure out how to work some things out between those two guys. And I love his comment. He's like, I don't want to get between those two old roosters.
Yeah, the best one also was like when Judd was like, why do grown men have to act like such babies? And Grace is like, I've been
I ask myself that every day.
Yes, that's
like
what
his
it
face,
was.
like, you did not just do that.
Yeah, he's like, no, you don't.
Yeah, so the next we see is a brief scene with Judd and Billy, and Judd's kind of loosening him up with some different types of alcohol. And finally Billy says, he's like, well, do you think I've watered up or something enough for you to tell me what you called me over here? And he's kind of questioning why they're making what Judd thinks is that the department is making Owen do the CPAT, not realizing that it's actually Owen's idea. So that's when he learned,
and he was
from
not
Billy
pleased.
that it was actually Owen's idea.
Oh,
yeah, he was not. He was very mad. But I was glad that Judd did decide to stand up for Owen, and try and at least talk to Billy and hopefully get him to lay off. But then Owen and Judd talked the next day at work, and Judd is really on him about it. And when he finds out that Owen agrees that yes, that I did, it was my idea, and he's not doing so hot in the whole training department, Judd says, nothing short of an act of God is gonna get this to be better. And he's like, I'm gonna do something I haven't done that my wife's been wanting me to do for a while. He's like, I'm gonna pray. And Owen's like, thanks for the prayers. And he's like, I'm not praying for you. I'm praying for the 126. I'm praying for the crew. Because if you leave or they kick you out, none of them are sticking around. So I'm going to pray for them. And it kind of leaves.
You know what?
Owen
I think that's actually really
taste,
good, though, because this is like another reinforcement that, like, yeah, Judd really does view this as, like, his new family, his new crew. And we get that. We got that with the fight with him and TK. And even earlier in the episode, when he's like, oh, we're all brothers because we have the same number on our badge. But like this, he's like, yeah, I'm going to stand up to a longtime friend and I'm going to pray that something happens which prevents this from happening, because I love this crew. And I'm like, that is... I think that's serious character development, and it's also... It's endearing, honestly. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's so much growth on Judd's part.
Yeah.
You know, and even when Grace and Judd were talking a few scenes prior, they were, you know, she said if it wasn't for Owen, she's not sure where she and Judd would even be right now. Owen hadn't forced Judd to go to counseling. So I think part of her is like, you know, you need to stand up for him because he stood up for you, kind of helped us out. So somehow Billy and Owen decide to go golfing again. I guess that's where they air out their laundry, is on the golf course. And
smack talk.
It starts raining.
Honestly, I skipped through most of the scene when I initially watched it. In fact, I don't think I've ever watched the full golf scene. Just when I realized it was going to be cringeworthy, I'm like, I'm sure I can catch up, so I keep skipping.
Yeah.
But I did realize there was something happening, so I backtracked to, like, the lightning.
I've always watched them live, so there's no option.
Good point.
Right, yeah. You know, and Billy's like, it's just a little rain, no worries. And then Owen finally caves and he gives him an offer of, he's like, okay, I'll resign.
And Billy knows about TK's issues? I didn't know that.
And then,
actually,
he's dropping some hints. He starts talking about all the different crew members, and what would be a problem for them if they were still there. And then he's like, and your boy, he's like, I think it'd be a little awkward, you know. And I heard he had some issues up in New York, and dropping hints that he knows some things about TK that, you know. So it sounds like he's done a little homework and done some research on the crew.
Yeah. And in that moment when he said that, I was like, okay, keep TK out of your mouth. Like, no.
Yes.
Don't be talking about my boy like that.
He's taunting. He's like, I have the power here. And, like, obviously, talking about the sun, that's the low blow. But that's all part of his game. And so it feels very fitting when he gets struck by lightning. Like,
karma.
Like, I couldn't even feel sorry.
I'm
like, I'm sorry. I'm sure that I should be feeling sorry, but I'm not actually, because act of God. Like, I love that.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, of course I didn't want to see him hurt, but as Judd said, I hope an act of God, which lightning was an act of God. And, you know, Billy went to hit the golf ball and the lightning hit the golf club. And, but then again, like, as soon as that happens and Billy goes down, Owen jumps into first responder mode and it's pouring down rain, and he picks Billy up and he runs him back to the clubhouse. And, you know, so then the next scene we get is Deputy Chief Radford and Owen in Owen's office, and the crew is down at the fire truck, fake cleaning it, so they can keep an eye
and
on
TK's
Owen
just up watching
the conversation they're having. Yeah. TK's watching.
TK's like,
and Judd's like, TK, what do you see in there? He's still in there. Yeah, I know he's still in there, TK. Who's doing the talking?
I love seeing, like, the various...
And TK's like, the deputy chief.
I love seeing it's weird, but I do. I love seeing, like, the different tensions. Like, obviously, TK's tense, because he's watching it. His dad's in there. Like, this is the deciding fate for both of them. And the rest of the team's anxious. And Judd's trying not to act anxious, but it's still kind of acting anxious. And, like, I love the little interactions in there.
Yeah, and they're all
that sentence sequence that you said, like, that's the best thing ever. Like, yeah, I know he's still in there, TK, because they ain't come out yet.
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh, yeah. And then when Owen walks him out, you know, when the deputy chief leaves, they all kind of chase Owen back into the kitchen where he's making coffee, and they're like trying to like, okay, well, he goes, what are you guys talking about? And then TK's like, everyone can relax. When he's this glib, it's always good news. And then everyone's like, come on, you know, what's the man say?
You know, it's like,
know,
turns out I already did.
Take the test again, or do the test. But he had done that, showed proof of that when he took carried Billy all the way back to the clubhouse in less than 2 minutes. So, like, everyone like relaxes when they hear that, like, no, he's clear, he's good, and they kind of all start to scurry away. But they all offer,
like, now all that's left we need to do is
for the cancer,
the cancer's ass or whatever.
Cool.
Yeah. And TK hugs him, and then he runs off, and
he kind of had a
little
bit
sad
of on his face, and I loved that. Like,
he's like, I know, I'm right. I was right. I got this.
He's like, I got it. only an act of God.
Yep.
And I love the little thing about his and Billy's friendship and Owen's questions about that. Like, oh, I thought you would have been happier having Billy run the team. He's your friend. Yeah, he's my friend, but you're my captain. Like, we love that.
Yeah. I just love that loyalty that he showed because, through it all, the man who's, Owen is his captain now. And so he's supporting him. And I love that. Because we didn't know at the beginning of the season, like, if Judd would eventually ever consider Owen a friend or a captain because he was the outsider. But it's obvious that Judd has really grown a lot and supports Owen. And I think that's awesome.
Definitely, again, character development.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, our last scene of the episode, I think, is the Carlos and Michelle are out.
Well, we also had the hospital scene
that her sister was
where
seen in.
Owen visits Billy. I just remembered that.
Oh yeah,
but,
that's right. What's the book that he gives him?
Oh yeah, Poker for Dummies.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's funny. They all kind of agreed that because Owen was going to stick around because they already are down one captain, so they didn't want to be down two. And since Owen did that, he's made it clear he's fit for duty.
He's proved it.
So, I don't know. Do you guys think we'll see Billy again?
I hope not.
Well, I think at the end of the episode, they made it clear. Well, Owen said, like, we're better off at being friends. Like, we shouldn't be each other's competition. So, I don't know. I think this story is closed. Like, I really think there would be nowhere to do this. And Billy, from what the episode, they said he's going to be laid up for a while.
Is if we, like, saw a glimpse of him as the captain at the other station, like, at a accident or something. But honestly, I feel like we're not going to see much, if at all, of him. Because, honestly, I cannot see why Owen would even want to spend that much time with this guy. Obviously, they're friends, I guess, now. But I'm like, I'm sorry, I'd have a hard time looking at the fact that you just tried to sabotage literally everything. But, you know what? I guess he's just able to do that.
Yeah, I think they played his story out, and I could only really see, like we said, seeing him in passing.
So then we kind of get the wrap up of Billy, and then we do see Carlos and Michelle at the site where they believe the truck went over that her sister was last seen in.
Like, he was there for
support
was there and comfort. Like because that's a really hard thing. The emotion in that little moment, it wasn't that big a moment. But the emotion in there, like, Liv's a wonderful actress. And so, like, just feeling it, I'm like, oh.
Yeah. But,
yeah. I don't know. To be honest, these last two episodes that we talked about, episodes 6 and 7, definitely needed to happen because I feel like it was one of many ways that Owens could finally
and, like, he couldn't hold
the team about his
cancer.
He
had a secret from the fire department forever. So.
Right. So this was a good way to, like, force his hand in a way to bring it up and tell people. In some ways, you could see this as like a filler, just because it's just typical crew stuff. But we got a lot of good elements and good moments of crew bonding, I think. So even though it's kind of the middle of the season, things are going well, and then something happens. So I don't know. I mean, they're decent episodes. We definitely have better episodes.
Yeah, for me, these episodes were my least favorite. But I liked the storyline with Mateo's testing, and I liked seeing TK help with Owen's training. Like, that's actually one of my favorite scenes. So, like, the little tidbits in there, but overall, the general themes, they're not my favorites.
Thank you guys so much for joining us and listening. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Anchor. We are also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and almost anywhere where you can find podcasts. On iTunes, you can rate us and leave us a review. It would mean a lot to us to get that. And you can follow the podcast on our socials at 91LS Roundup on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can follow me, Katie, at For the Love of Tarlos on Instagram, and at For Love of Tarlos on Twitter. And you can follow Shaz, I'm just going to save this right now, at Buttercup Strand on Twitter and Instagram.
And you can follow me, EJ, at EJ8302 on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
And you can follow me on Instagram, RonanRafa911, and on Twitter at SheepGirl31. All right,
Thanks
bye.
for joining us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys soon.